My name is Richard Hartwell, and 6 months ago I walked into a private dining room believing my daughter had finally come back to me. But before the night was over, I would learn that the child I had raised, protected, forgiven and funded for 36 years had been sitting across from me with murder in her heart. At 68 years old, I thought life had already taken its cruelest swing at me when it took my wife, Marianne. Losing Marianne changed everything. She had stood beside me long before there was money, success or recognition. Back when I was running freight deliveries with a single truck and a rented warehouse, she believed in me when nobody else did. While banks rejected my loan applications and competitors laughed at my ambitions, she kept telling me to keep going. So over 4 decades, that faith helped build Hartwell Marsh Logistics into one of the most respected transportation companies in the region. When I finally sold the business after 42 years, the deal changed my life overnight. After taxes, fees and settlements, nearly $68 million would land in my personal accounts. Friends wanted celebrations, business partners wanted speeches, but all I could think about was the one person who wasn't there to see it. Marianne. She had lost her battle with ovarian cancer 2 years earlier, and when we buried her, something between my daughter and me quietly fractured. We never had a dramatic falling out. There were no screaming matches, no public arguments. Instead, distance settled between us little by little. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became less frequent. Conversations felt careful, as if both of us were avoiding subjects too painful to discuss. We still acted like family, but we no longer felt like one. Then, 2 weeks before the sale proceeds officially cleared, my daughter called. The moment I heard her voice, something felt different. She sounded softer, warmer, almost like the little girl who used to race into my office after school and sit on my lap while I worked. She told me she missed me. She said she had been thinking about her mother. Then she said something I hadn't heard in years. "I'm proud of you, Dad." Those words hit harder than any business achievement ever could. Before ending the call, she invited me to dinner. Just the 3 of us. Her husband, and me. No lawyers. No financial advisors. No business discussions. Just family. Looking back now, I should have questioned the timing. I should have wondered why years of emotional distance suddenly disappeared right before the largest financial transaction of my life. But grief has a way of making people hopeful, and hope can blind even the smartest person, so I accepted immediately. That Thursday evening, I put on the navy suit Marianne had always loved, drove through a steady September rain and headed downtown, carrying something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Optimism. I believed this dinner might heal old wounds. I believed my daughter wanted her father back. I believed we were finally rebuilding what death had broken. What I didn't know was that someone at that table had already begun planning a future without me in it, and before the night ended, a complete stranger would save my life. The restaurant had reserved a private dining room called the Hartwell Room. The coincidence made me smile when I first heard it. Now, looking back, it feels almost cruel. My son-in-law was already standing when I entered. He greeted me with an enthusiastic handshake and a polished smile that somehow felt rehearsed. "Richard," he said, "tonight is about celebrating everything you've accomplished." I thanked him and took my seat. Across the table, my daughter looked beautiful. She wore a green dress and a pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother. For a moment, seeing those pearls brought back memories of happier times. I nearly forgot all the distance that had grown between us. Nearly, because as dinner progressed, small details began catching my attention. My daughter kept touching the black purse beside her chair, not opening it, not moving it, just touching it, again and again. At first, I thought nothing of it. Then I realized she had done it more than 10 times in less than 20 minutes. The habit felt nervous, almost compulsive. Meanwhile, my son-in-law behaved strangely in his own way. He ordered a drink but barely touched it. Anyone who knew him understood how unusual that was. At family gatherings, business lunches, holidays, he never passed up an opportunity for a drink. Yet that evening he seemed unusually disciplined. His attention remained fixed on me, more specifically on my wine glass. Every time I lifted it, I noticed his eyes follow the movement. When I set it down, his shoulders seemed to relax. The feeling in my stomach grew heavier. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. After all, years of tension can make people suspicious. Maybe I was seeing problems that weren't really there. Then I noticed the waiter. He was young and attentive, but there was something unusual about the way he observed our table. Several times I caught him looking directly at my daughter, not admiring her, watching her, the way a security guard watches a potential problem. The atmosphere felt increasingly uncomfortable. Still, I forced myself to continue the evening. I laughed when appropriate, answered questions, discussed the sale of the company, pretended everything was normal. Around 8:30, my phone vibrated. The caller ID showed my CFO. I immediately knew why he was calling. For months, we had been waiting for confirmation that the acquisition funds had cleared. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. The moment I answered, I heard excitement in his voice. "Richard, it's done." I stopped walking. The wire just cleared. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. 42 years of work, 42 years of sacrifices, every sleepless night, every risk, every setback, every victory, all of it had led to this moment. The transaction was complete. The money was officially mine. After ending the call, I remained in the hallway for a few moments. I found myself thinking about Mary Ann, about how badly I wished she could have shared that moment with me. Then I heard footsteps. I turned and saw the waiter approaching. At first, I assumed he was simply passing by. Instead, he stopped beside me. His expression looked tense, almost frightened. "Sir," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his voice immediately got my attention. "What is it?" He glanced toward the dining room entrance before answering. "Please don't react." My chest tightened. The words alone were enough to make my pulse quicken. "React to what?" The waiter swallowed hard. Then he leaned closer. "While you were on the phone, your daughter put something into your wine." For a moment, I genuinely thought I had misunderstood him. My mind refused to process the sentence. "What did you say?" "I saw her pour a white powder into your glass." The hallway suddenly felt colder. I stared at him, searching for uncertainty. There was none. He wasn't guessing. He wasn't speculating. He was absolutely certain. 1,000 thoughts collided inside my head. My daughter? Why? How? The questions came so quickly, I couldn't focus on any of them. Finally, I managed to ask the only one that mattered. "Why are you telling me this?" The young man looked me directly in the eye. His answer changed everything. "Because my uncle died from poisoning." He paused. "And because if I stay silent and something happens to you, I'll never forgive myself." In that instant, the dinner stopped being a family reunion. It became something else entirely, something dangerous, something I wasn't prepared to face. And as I stood there staring at the young waiter, I realized I was about to discover whether my worst fears were true, or whether I was about to lose my daughter forever. For several seconds, I couldn't move. The waiter stood silently beside me, while my entire world seemed to tilt sideways. Every memory I had of my daughter fought against what I had just heard. The little girl who begged me to check for monsters under her bed. The teenager who cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. The woman I had rescued from financial disasters more times than I could count. None of those memories matched the image of someone secretly poisoning her father's drink. And yet something deep inside me already knew the truth. Too many details from that evening suddenly made sense. The nervous phone call, the sudden affection, the repeated glances toward my wine, the tension hidden beneath forced smiles. I looked back at the waiter. "Are you absolutely sure?" He nodded immediately. I watched the entire thing. His certainty left no room for denial. A businessman survives by recognizing patterns, and the pattern in front of me was becoming impossible to ignore. I took a slow breath and made a decision. If the waiter was mistaken, I could still preserve what remained of my relationship with my daughter. But if he was right, confronting her too soon could put me in even greater danger. "I need your help," I said quietly. The waiter looked surprised. "What do you need?" I glanced toward the private dining room. When I returned, create a distraction. His eyes widened slightly. Then he understood. A few seconds later, he gave a small nod. As he disappeared toward the kitchen, I stood alone in the hallway trying to steady my nerves. For the first time that evening, I stopped hoping I was wrong, because deep down I feared I wasn't. And as I walked back toward the dining room, I had no idea that within the next 15 minutes, the entire plan was about to collapse in the most unexpected way imaginable.